Before you dive into this gripping tale of loss, secrets, and an undeniable second chance, smash that subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up, and tell us in the comments, what's the biggest secret someone has ever kept from you, and how did it impact your life? The billionaire's lost years. The tempered glass of the 30th floor reflected the gray London clouds like a melancholic mirror. Richard Davies adjusted his navy blue tie for the third time in 5 minutes, a nervous habit he'd developed over the last few months of his deteriorating marriage. At 34, he carried the weight of a financial empire on his shoulders and a personal life in ruins. His secretary discreetly knocked on the door. "Mr. Davies, the representatives from the Green Earth have arrived for the 3 o'clock meeting." Richard nodded without taking his gaze off the city that stretched out like a labyrinth of concrete and interrupted dreams. Another unfounded accusation, he thought. Another process that would cost him time and resources to prove the company's innocence. He was tired of fighting shadows. "Send them in, Martha." The door opened with an almost inaudible sound, and Richard slowly turned, preparing the corporate smile he'd used for countless negotiations. But the smile died on his lips before it was born. Eleanor Vance, 7 years. 7 years of silence, of unanswered questions, of sleepless nights searching for clues as to why she had simply vanished from his life like smoke dissolving into the air. And there she was, in an impeccable black business suit, brown hair pulled back in an elegant bun, carrying a leather briefcase, and an expression he knew well. Determination masking vulnerability. Time seemed to stretch like a rubber band about to snap. Richard felt his heart race in a way it hadn't since the last time he'd seen her. "Richard." Her voice was deeper, more controlled, professional. "Dr. Vance." He could only whisper her name as if it were a forgotten prayer returning to memory. The other NGO members entered behind her, a middle-aged man with a gray beard and a young woman with glasses. But Richard didn't see them. He could only see Eleanor, and the way she avoided his gaze, focusing on neutral points in the room. "Please, have a seat." Richard gestured toward the conference table, surprised by the firmness of his own voice. Eleanor chose the chair furthest from him, opening her briefcase with precise mechanical movements. Her hands, Richard noticed, trembled almost imperceptibly. She still wore her university graduation ring on her right pinky finger. "Mr. Davies," the bearded man began, who had introduced himself as Dr. Robert Green. "We are here to discuss the situation of the industrial land in the East End borough. Our organization has received complaints that Davies Construction has been aware of soil contamination for over 2 years. Richard forced himself to pay attention, but his eyes continued to be drawn to Eleanor like an irresistible magnet. She scribbled notes in a planner, the same small, neat handwriting he used to find in notes left on the refrigerator when they lived together. "We have all environmental permits in order," Richard replied, activating autopilot. "Our company has always rigorously followed legislation. Legislation didn't protect the families developing chronic respiratory problems." Eleanor's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Nor the children born with neurological malformations in the last 3 years." She looked at him directly for the first time, and Richard felt the impact of those greenish-brown eyes like a punch to the stomach. There was pain there, old pain and new pain, mixed in an expression that left him breathless. "Dr. Vance is right," Dr. Green continued. "We need total transparency. Access to the original reports, soil analyses, impact studies." The meeting lasted an hour. Richard could barely concentrate on the technical issues, the legal demands, the deadlines. His mind was trapped in a past he couldn't digest. The dawn he woke up to find only a 2-line letter on the dresser. "I can't do this anymore. Forgive me. Eleanor." When the representative stood to leave, Richard felt an irrational despair. "Dr. Vance, could you stay a few more minutes? I'd like to discuss some specific points of the process. Eleanor hesitated, closing her briefcase with unnecessary force. I have another engagement, Mr. Davies. Please, it'll be quick. Dr. Green and the assistant said their goodbyes, leaving them alone in the room, which now seemed larger and quieter. Richard walked to the window, his back to her. Why did you come back? Silence stretched like an eternity. When Eleanor spoke, her voice was different, lower, less controlled. I've been working here in London for 3 years. 3 years. He turned slowly. And you never what? Never looked for me? A bitter laugh escaped his lips. You got married, Richard. I saw the photos in the papers. The wedding of the year. Remember? Richard closed his eyes. Catherine. The marriage that had transformed into a gilded cage, into endless nights of arguments, into a corrosive silence that consumed everything around them. You left me. The words came out harsher than he intended. You just disappeared, without explanation, without... I had my reasons. What reasons? Richard took a step towards her. What reasons justify disappearing from someone's life? Canceling a wedding by letter? Leaving someone wondering for years what they did wrong? Eleanor stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. Her hands trembled visibly now. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Give me a reason. Anything that makes sense. His shout echoed through the room, and both were paralyzed by the intensity of the emotion. Richard ran a hand through his hair, trying to compose himself. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I was pregnant. The words fell like stones into a silent lake. Richard felt the world shift beneath his feet. What? Eleanor took a deep breath, as if preparing to plunge into deep waters. When I found out I was pregnant, my father was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. I was 25, Richard. Motherless since 16. No family, no support network. And you were building your company, your dreams. I couldn't. You were pregnant with my child? His voice was hoarse, incredulous. Children, Eleanor corrected, tears finally escaping. Twins. The world stopped. Richard felt his legs weaken, and he leaned against the table. Where are they? Anna and Arthur. They're 7. Eleanor wiped her face with the back of her hand. They're at school now. 7 years. Richard repeated the words as if they were in a foreign language. I have 7-year-old children. Richard, where are they? He approached her, his eyes blazing with a mix of anger and despair. I want to see them. Now. It doesn't work like that. How does it work then? Richard practically shouted. You decide alone when I can meet my own children? Eleanor recoiled, but didn't lower her gaze. They don't know you exist, Richard. To them, you're just a man who couldn't stay. You stole my children. The accusation came out low, but laden with pain. 7 years, Eleanor. 7 years of first steps, first words, birthdays. You stole all of that from me. I was protecting them. From what? What were you protecting us from? Eleanor looked away, her breathing ragged. From me. From my family. From the genetics I carry. Richard frowned, confused. What genetics? Mosaic Turner syndrome. The words came out like a painful confession. A rare condition that can affect neurological development. I found out when I was pregnant. There's a probability of transmission to the children. I couldn't put that responsibility on you. So, you decided to bear it alone. I had no choice. Yes, you did! Richard slammed his fist on the table. You could have trusted me. You could have told me. We were partners, Eleanor. Fiancés. We were going to get married, remember? Eleanor sobbed, all professional composure finally breaking down. I was scared. My father wasted away each day without recognizing my face anymore. My mother died tragically when I needed her most. I couldn't risk you abandoning me too. It was easier to leave first. Richard stood in silence for a long moment, processing all the information. When he spoke again, his voice was calmer, but laden with deep sadness. You didn't even give me a chance to choose to stay. Eleanor, I loved you. He looked her in the eyes. I loved you more than any dream, more than any company. And you knew it. Eleanor shook her head, tears falling freely now. I loved you too. That's why I left. They stood there, separated by meters of distance and years of resentment, but united by a shared pain that neither knew how to heal. The children's medical exams, Richard asked, his voice faltering. How are they? Arthur is fine, perfectly healthy. But Anna, Eleanor took a deep breath, shows some neurological symptoms. We're still investigating. That's why I came back to London. The best specialists are here. Richard felt a knot in his chest. A daughter he didn't know, possibly ill, needing care he didn't even know he should offer. I want to help. Richard, please. He approached her, stopping inches away. Don't ask me to pretend I don't know they exist. Don't ask me to keep living as if I don't have children. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, and Richard saw in those eyes the same love that had sustained him for years, mixed with fear and hesitation. They're going to have a lot of questions. I have answers. They might not accept you immediately. I can wait. Eleanor closed her eyes, and Richard knew an internal battle was being fought there. When she opened them again, there was a fragile but determined resolution. They get home from school at 5. There's a park near our house where they usually play. She hesitated. You can show up as if it's a coincidence, as an acquaintance of mine. Let me prepare the ground. Richard nodded, his heart beating so hard he was sure she could hear it. Where? Eleanor scribbled an address on a paper and handed it to him. Their fingers touched briefly, and Richard felt the same electricity from years ago. Richard. She hesitated at the door. I'm so sorry for everything. I know it's not justified, but I'm truly sorry. After she left, Richard remained alone in the room, looking at the paper in his hands, as if it were a map to a lost treasure. 2 hours until he met his children. 2 hours to figure out how to explain 7 years of involuntary absence. He picked up his phone and canceled all engagements for the rest of the week. Some meetings could wait a lifetime. Others couldn't. Do you think Eleanor's past actions were justified, given her circumstances? How will the children react to meeting their biological father for the first time? Share your thoughts and predictions in the comments. Hyde Park buzzed with the typical energy of late afternoon. Children ran among the playground equipment, while parents balanced quick conversations with watchful glances. Richard parked his black SUV at a safe distance and remained in the car for a few minutes, his hands trembling against the steering wheel. 7 years. 7 years of lost life. 7 years of ungiven hugs. Untold stories. Nights when he couldn't check if they were tucked in properly before bed. Anger and nostalgia mixed in his chest like toxic ingredients. He checked his watch, 5:15. Eleanor said they usually arrived by 5. Richard got out of the car, adjusted his blue dress shirt, and walked towards the benches near the playground. He chose a strategic spot, visible but not intimidating, as if he were there by chance. His heart leaped when he saw Eleanor approaching on the sidewalk. She wore jeans and a simple white blouse, her hair loose, waving in the wind. But it wasn't her who caught his attention. It was them. Anna ran a few steps ahead, her light blonde hair in 2 messy braids. She wore a navy blue dress with small yellow flowers and pink sneakers that flashed with every step. Arthur walked beside his mother, more composed, a Spider-Man backpack on his back, and a serious expression that Richard recognized as his own childhood trademark. Richard felt the air leave his lungs. They were beautiful, perfectly, devastatingly beautiful, and there was something in both their eyes, that specific grayish-blue hue, that left no doubt about their paternity. "Mommy, can I go on the slide?" Anna's voice was high-pitched, full of life. "You can, my love, but stay where I can see you." Eleanor sat on a nearby bench, pretending not to have noticed Richard, but he perceived the tension in her shoulders. Arthur remained by her side, observing the park's activity with the patience of someone much older. Richard took a deep breath and stood up, walking casually towards the water fountain near their bench. As he passed, he made sure to stumble slightly, dropping his keys. Eleanor feigned surprise, bending down to pick up the keys. "Eleanor Vance?" She turned, and Richard saw the thinly disguised nervousness in her eyes. "Richard, what a coincidence. What are you doing here?" Her acting wasn't convincing, but it would do. "I live a few blocks from here. I usually run in the park." He gestured vaguely towards the running track. "And you?" "Oh, I brought the children to play a bit." Eleanor hesitated. "Richard, these are my children, Anna and Arthur." Arthur observed him with analytical eyes, clearly evaluating whether Richard posed any threat. "Hello," the boy said, his voice cautious. "Hello, Arthur." Richard knelt to his height. "Nice to meet you. Do you know my mom from work?" "We've known each other for a long time," Richard responded carefully. "We're old friends." Anna had stopped playing and approached, curiosity overcoming initial shyness. "You have the same eyes as us," she observed, tilting her head to the side. Richard felt his heart skip a beat. Childlike sincerity could be devastating. "Really?" He smiled. "Maybe it's a coincidence. My teacher said there's no such thing as coincidence. She said everything happens for a reason." Anna swayed on the tips of her toes. "What's your name?" "Richard." "That's a cool name." She smiled, revealing a slightly crooked front tooth. "Do you want to see how I can go down the slide head first?" Eleanor quickly stood up. "Anna, don't do that. It's dangerous." "But Mommy, maybe he could show me how she slides normally first," Richard suggested. "I bet she's very brave." Anna beamed and ran back to the playground. Richard sat on the bench next to Eleanor, maintaining a respectful distance. "She's—" He stopped, unable to find words. "Energetic, stubborn, too curious for her own good," Eleanor completed, but there was affection in her voice. "Perfect," Richard said simply. "She's perfect." Arthur had sat on the other side of his mother, but he continued to observe Richard. "Do you have children?" the boy suddenly asked. The question hit Richard like a punch. He looked at Eleanor, who averted her eyes. "No," he answered honestly. "I don't have children." "Why, Arthur?" Eleanor gently reprimanded him. "It's okay." Richard turned to the boy. "That's a good question. I guess I never found the right person to start a family with." "My mom doesn't have a husband either," Arthur commented. "She said our dad couldn't stay with us." Each word was a dagger. Richard had to swallow before responding. "Sometimes circumstances are complicated." "Do you think he'd like us?" Arthur asked. "Our dad?" And there was a vulnerability in his voice that broke Richard's heart. "I'm sure he would love you more than anything in the world," Richard replied, his voice choked with emotion. "Like any father would love such special children." Arthur smiled for the first time, a small but genuine smile. "Do you want to see my drawing?" He opened his backpack and took out a notebook. "I drew a dragon at school today." Richard took the notebook with careful hands, as if holding something precious. The drawing showed a dark green dragon with golden wings, breathing fire towards a castle. "It's incredible. You're very talented." "Anna draws better than me," Arthur admitted. "She draws people. I only know how to make dragons and cars." "Dragons and cars are cool subjects," Richard said seriously. "Do you like cars?" Arthur's eyes lit up. "I do, especially sports cars. My mom said that when I grow up I can have one, if I work hard." "That's a good plan." Richard smiled. "What's your favorite?" "Ferrari, red," Arthur answered without hesitation. "And you? Do you have a car?" I have a few, Richard admitted. Perhaps one day I can show them to you. Really? Arthur brightened, but soon looked at his mother. If Mom lets me, of course. Eleanor was tense. Richard could feel it. The situation was getting out of hand, and he knew he needed to pull back. Look, you two. Anna ran back, her cheeks red with excitement. I made a friend. Her name is Sarah, and she has a dog named Popcorn. That's great, my love, Eleanor replied, checking her watch. But it's getting late. We need to go home. Already? Anna pouted. 5 more minutes? Anna, 5 more minutes, please. Richard can stay and watch me go down the slide properly. Richard looked at Eleanor, who hesitated. I think your mom is right. It's getting dark. Are you going to come back here sometimes? Arthur asked. Well, I run here a few times a week. We come here every Tuesday and Thursday, Anna informed him. And Saturdays, too, when we don't have other things to do. Anna! Eleanor reprimanded her. We don't need to tell everyone our schedule. But he's not just anyone, Mommy. He's your friend. Richard and Eleanor exchanged a meaningful glance. That's true, Richard said softly. We're old friends. Then you can come back, Arthur decided. Friends can come back. On the way to Eleanor's car, a white Honda Civic with a few scratches, Anna skipped beside Richard, chattering about school, about the teacher with purple hair, about the cat that appeared in their garden. Richard, she suddenly said, stopping. Are you sad? The question caught him off guard. Why do you ask that? Your eyes get sad sometimes, just like Mommy's when she thinks I'm not looking at her. Richard knelt to her height. Sometimes adults get sad about things from the past, but being here with you makes me happy. Then you should come more often, so you don't feel sad. The innocence in her voice almost made him cry right there. Maybe I will. When they reached Eleanor's car, Arthur hesitated before getting in. Richard. Yes. Thanks for not leaving when Anna was chattering. A lot of people get annoyed. I loved talking to you two. Arthur smiled again and got into the car. Anna waved energetically through the window as they drove away. Richard stood on the sidewalk until the car disappeared, feeling as if a part of him had been torn away. They were his children. His children, who didn't know who he was, who had grown up without him, who were perfect and wonderful and inches away but completely out of reach. He took out his cell phone and dialed Eleanor's number. Hello? They're incredible. Silence on the other end of the line. Richard! No, let me talk. His voice trembled. They're incredible, Eleanor. Smart, loving, curious. And I lost everything. All the important moments. All the little everyday miracles. I lost everything. I know. Her voice was choked. I know. And I'm sorry. How do you do it? He asked. How do you manage to raise them alone? It's overwhelming. Some days are harder than others. Eleanor sighed. Especially with Anna. She has episodes, intense headaches, mental confusion. The doctors are still investigating. Richard's stomach clenched. How can I help? Richard, we already talked about this. They liked me, Eleanor. Did you see? Anna invited me back. Arthur shared his drawing. They need a father figure, even if they don't know I'm their father yet. A long pause. You have to understand one thing, Eleanor finally said. If you enter their lives, you can't give up. You can't decide it's too difficult and leave. They've suffered enough. I'm not going anywhere. How can I be sure? Because I love them, Richard answered without hesitation. I met them 2 hours ago, and I already love them more than I knew it was possible to love anyone. Imagine after a lifetime. Another silence. Tuesday? Eleanor finally said. You can come on Tuesday. But slowly, Richard. They need to get used to you first. Thank you. He closed his eyes in relief. Thank you for giving me this chance. When he hung up the phone, Richard sat in the driver's seat and allowed himself to cry for the first time in years. He cried for the loss, for the nostalgia, for the instant and overwhelming love he felt for two children he barely knew, but who were, indisputably, the most important thing that had ever happened to him in his life. Tuesday couldn't come soon enough. What profound impact do you think this revelation will have on Richard's life moving forward? How will Eleanor navigate the delicate process of integrating him into the children's lives? Share your insights and predictions in the comments. 3 months later, Eleanor's apartment had transformed into something completely different from what it was before Richard's return. The walls, once sober and neutral, decorated only with diplomas and abstract paintings, now displayed a colorful and chaotic gallery of children's drawings. Dark green dragons by Arthur vied for space with family portraits by Anna, where everyone appeared hand in hand under a smiling yellow-orange sun. On the refrigerator, colorful animal-shaped magnets held a growing collection of keepsakes, park photos taken with Richard's phone, reminders of doctor's appointments written in Eleanor's neat handwriting, school reports with golden stars, and a special note written in hesitant childish script. Richard is our special friend and makes Mommy smile. Below, in Arthur's firmer handwriting, was written, "He makes us smile too." Richard had become a constant and expected presence on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and on Saturdays, when he didn't have urgent company commitments. What began as casual and carefully orchestrated encounters in the park had naturally evolved into entire afternoons at Eleanor's home. Dedicated help with homework, dinners that stretched until the children fell asleep on the living room sofa, still clutching the storybooks he read, with different voices for each character. Arthur had officially adopted him as a confidant for all manly matters. Sports cars he saw on the street and dreamed of driving when he grew up. Football teams and their incomprehensible statistics. And mainly, the deep and seemingly insoluble mysteries of the female universe, represented by his sister Anna and his mother Eleanor. Anna, for her part, had included him in all her sacred and non-negotiable rituals, the careful choice of bedtime stories, which varied between brave princesses and intrepid adventurers, the detailed technical evaluation of each of her drawings. This dragon has a sad face, or an angry face, and daily consultations about which clothes made her prettier than a real princess, but not those silly ones who wait for a prince. Eleanor watched this transformation, with her heart constantly torn between the deepest gratitude and a fear that gnawed at her from within. Every genuine laugh the children shared with Richard was simultaneously a blessing that warmed her soul, and a punishment that reminded her of everything she had denied them for 7 long years. How could she explain to 2 innocent children that this man they loved with growing naturalness, who treated them with instinctive paternal affection, who knew their quirks and fears as if he had always been present, was actually the father they believed they had lost forever before even knowing him? The question tormented her during her sleepless nights, when she would listen to Richard read stories in the next room, his deep, loving voice narrating adventures of improbable heroes and happy endings that seemed like promises whispered in the dark. "Mommy!" Anna appeared in the kitchen on that sunny Thursday in March, while Eleanor prepared dinner with automatic movements, lost in thought. "Is Richard having dinner with us today?" "Yes, my love." Eleanor forced a smile, stirring the tomato sauce with more force than necessary. "But remember, he has to leave earlier today. He has an important engagement." "What kind of engagement?" Arthur appeared behind his sister, as he always did, his investigative curiosity in full swing. Eleanor hesitated, the wooden spoon suspended in the air. She couldn't say that Richard was meeting his lawyers to finalize the last details of his divorce from Catherine, a process that had dragged on for months amidst increasingly absurd and deeply hurtful accusations, and a growing emotional instability that left everyone around them treading carefully. "Work stuff, Arthur. Boring adult stuff." "He works a lot," Anna observed, thoughtfully nibbling on a carrot she had stolen from the salad. "Just like you, Mommy. You two work a lot. Adults sometimes need to work a lot to take care of the people they love," Eleanor explained, hoping the answer would be sufficient. "Does Richard love us?" Anna's question was asked with the disconcerting naturalness of someone asking about the weather or the color of the sky. Eleanor almost dropped the pot. The question hit her like a punch to the stomach, not out of surprise, but out of the absolute certainty of the answer she couldn't give. "Why do you ask that, my love?" "Because he looks at us just like you do." Anna tilted her head to the side, as she did when she was processing something important. "With that protective look, you know, like when you worry when I'm sick, or when Arthur is sad. And yesterday I dreamed he was our real dad. It was a very nice dream." Arthur rolled his eyes with typical older brother impatience. "Anna, you dream the craziest things. Last week you dreamed you were a mermaid and could breathe underwater." "But this dream was different," Anna insisted, her eyes shining with a conviction that scared Eleanor. "It was like in the movies. He picked us up from school every day, played with us in the garden at home, slept here at home, had breakfast with us. It was like we were a real family." "We are a real family," Eleanor said quickly. "The three of us, we are a complete family." "I know, Mommy," Anna smiled with exaggerated patience. "But in the dream, we were an even more complete family, with a daddy and a mommy and children, like my friends' families at school." Arthur remained silent for a moment, and Eleanor realized with a knot in her heart that he also thought about it, even if he didn't verbalize it like his sister. "Anna!" Eleanor knelt to her daughter's level, her hands still trembling slightly. "How do you feel when you're with Richard?" "Safe." The answer came without hesitation, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Like when you hug me after a nightmare. Like nothing bad can happen to me. Like he can fight any monster to protect me." Arthur nodded silently, and Eleanor realized with a knot in her heart that he felt exactly the same way. Her children had found in Richard something that even she herself hadn't perceived they were seeking. The paternal figure that completed the emotional puzzle of their lives. The doorbell rang, interrupting the meaningful moment. Anna ran to open it as she always did, followed by Arthur, who automatically assumed his role as the more cautious protector. Eleanor heard the children's exclamations of joy and Richard's deep voice responding with equal enthusiasm and genuine affection. "I brought you a surprise," Richard announced when they entered the kitchen, carrying a mysterious bag. "What surprise? What surprise?" Anna jumped impatiently, trying to peek inside the bag. Richard showed a small box with colorful tickets. "Tickets for the cinema. There's a new Spider-Man movie, and I thought we could go on Saturday. If your mom lets you, of course." "We can, Mommy, please, please, please." Anna clasped her hands in dramatic supplication. "I really want to see that movie," Arthur added, with more contained but equally genuine enthusiasm. "I heard the kids at school say it's the best one ever." "Of course you can." Eleanor smiled, but Richard noticed the familiar tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided looking at him directly. "It's going to be fun." During dinner, the children chattered animatedly about the movie they were going to see, about school friends and their latest antics, about the science project Arthur was developing with the dedication of a small scientist. Richard participated in the conversation with a naturalness that seemed to have been born with him, asking intelligent questions that showed genuine interest, laughing at childish jokes as if they were the funniest things in the world, helping Anna cut her meat with infinite patience. Eleanor observed him discreetly, as she did every night. He was a natural father, effortless and unpretentious, patient with Anna's endless mischief, attentive to Arthur's silent needs, who preferred to show affection through small gestures, affectionate without being permissive, present without being smothering. Everything she had dreamed he would be if he had had the opportunity to be a father from the beginning. "Richard," Arthur suddenly said, in the middle of his milk pudding dessert, "are you married?" The question took everyone by surprise. Richard almost choked on his pudding, and Eleanor felt her blood run cold. "Why do you ask that, Arthur?" "Just curious." Arthur shrugged with studied casualness. "You never talk about your family, and you wear a wedding ring." Richard looked at his own hand, where the white gold ring still gleamed. He continued to wear it more out of automatic habit than for any emotional meaning it might hold. "I'm getting divorced," he replied with careful honesty. "Sometimes marriages don't work out, even if people try very hard." "Is it sad?" Anna asked, with the devastating sincerity only children possess. "A little." Richard considered the answer. "But it's also a relief when two people realize they can no longer make each other happy, no matter how hard they try. And that's why you stay here with us?" Arthur continued his meticulous investigation. "Because you're lonely?" "No." Richard looked directly at each of them. "I stay here with you because it's where I want to be, because you make me happy in a way I didn't even know was possible." "Are you going to get married again?" Arthur persisted, with the determination of a small detective. Richard looked directly at Eleanor, who was too concentrated on her pudding. "Perhaps if I find the right person." "How will you know she's the right person?" Anna leaned forward, intensely interested in the subject. "I think you know it when you look at her, and you feel like you've come home." His voice became lower, more intimate. "When you can't imagine a single day of your life without her, when she makes you want to be a better person, just to be worthy of her love." The silence that followed was laden with heavy meaning and expectation. Eleanor averted her gaze, her cheeks slightly flushed, pretending to be absorbed in wiping a non-existent stain from the table. "Can I have more pudding?" Anna broke the tension with childish practicality. "Just a little bit more," Eleanor replied, still avoiding Richard's eyes. Later, after the children had gone to bed following the elaborate ritual of brushing teeth, choosing pajamas, and listening to another story. This time about a dragon who discovered he was a vegetarian, Eleanor and Richard remained on the apartment's small balcony, drinking coffee and watching the London lights stretch to the horizon like an ocean of terrestrial stars. "They asked a lot of questions today," Eleanor commented, breaking the comfortable silence. "Children are naturally curious. It's part of their normal development." "Richard," she hesitated, her hands gripping the coffee cup as if it were an anchor. "I think it's time to tell them the truth." Richard turned to her completely, surprised by the sudden declaration. "Are you sure? I thought you wanted to wait longer. They're getting very attached to you, and you to them." Eleanor sighed deeply. "If something goes wrong, if for some reason you have to suddenly leave—" "I already told you I'm not going anywhere, Eleanor." "I know, but life is unpredictable. And besides," she paused, "they deserve to know who you really are, especially because of Anna's medical situation." Anna's most recent exams had revealed some subtle but worrying neurological alterations that required constant and specialized medical follow-up. The neurologists needed the complete paternal family history to define the best treatment protocol and fully understand her clinical picture. "How do you want to do it?" Richard asked, his voice filled with a mixture of anxiety and expectation. "I don't know." Eleanor laughed without humor, a bitter sound that cut through the night. "How do you explain to two 7-year-olds that you lied to them for their entire known lives? How do you ask for forgiveness for stealing their right to know their own father? You didn't lie, Eleanor. You protected them in the only way you knew how at the time, in the same way I was protected when I knew they existed." The irony in his voice was clear and painful. "Protection through omission and silence never works for long, Richard. the truth always finds a way to come out. Richard remained silent, acknowledging that she was entirely right. Protection through silence was an illusion that always ended up causing more pain than relief. "How about this weekend?" he suggested carefully. "After the cinema, when they're relaxed and happy, we can take them to a special place and talk calmly." "Where?" "I know a perfect place." Richard smiled with a nostalgic sadness. "A country estate in the Lake District I used to go to with my father when I was a child, and we needed to have important conversations. It's quiet, beautiful, surrounded by nature. A place where important conversations happen naturally." Eleanor nodded slowly, fear and determination battling in her chest. "Okay, then this weekend, after the cinema." "Everything's going to be okay," Richard said, but his own voice carried uncertainty. "How can you be so sure?" "Because they already love us as a family. The truth will only formalize what we all already know in our hearts." Do you think this is the right time for Richard and Eleanor to tell the children the truth? How will Anna and Arthur react to such a life-altering revelation? Share your thoughts and predictions. The day that changed everything. Friday arrived with a cloudy, heavy sky, laden with a humidity that seemed to presage a storm. Eleanor woke with a strange, persistent feeling in her stomach, as if something bad was approaching on the horizon. A maternal intuition that left her restless for no apparent reason. Anna woke up in a bad mood with a throbbing headache. Symptoms that had become more frequent and worrying in recent weeks, leaving Eleanor constantly alert to any sign of worsening. "I don't want to go to school today," she complained during breakfast, pushing her fruit plate aside with complete disinterest. "You have to go, my love." Eleanor tried to keep her voice calm and patient. "Today is the day of your marine animals project presentation. You worked so hard on it, remember?" "I don't care about stupid marine animals anymore." Anna pouted exaggeratedly. "My head hurts so much, and I just want to stay in bed." Arthur watched his sister with the growing concern that had become his trademark in recent weeks. He had developed an almost paternal protective instinct towards Anna, as if he intuitively felt she was more fragile and needed extra care. "And do you want me to stay with you at school today?" he offered seriously. "I can ask Mrs. Peterson to let me see your presentation in the other class." "You have your own class, Arthur," Eleanor said gently, touched by her son's dedication. "And your own math presentation. But I take care of Anna. It's my job to take care of her." The simple phrase, laden with responsibility, broke Eleanor's heart. Arthur, at 7 years old, already carried the emotional weight of being the older brother, the designated protector, responsible for a security that should exclusively belong to adults. "I know you take care of her, my love, and that makes me very proud. But Anna will be fine at school, and afterwards, you two will go to Mrs. Johnson's, as always, where you can look after each other." Mrs. Johnson was the elderly neighbor from the next apartment who looked after the children during the few crucial hours between school dismissal and Eleanor's arrival from work. A sweet and maternal woman whom the children had spontaneously adopted as an honorary grandmother, and who treated them both with the affection of someone who never had grandchildren of her own to spoil. The day passed with the tense normalcy of ordinary days. Eleanor concentrated on preparing for an important hearing on Monday. Richard dealt with the last bureaucratic procedures of his divorce, and the children followed their school routines seemingly without problems. Until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when Eleanor's phone rang with the shrill urgency of an emergency. "Dr. Vance!" Mrs. Johnson's voice was visibly distressed, laden with a worry that chilled Eleanor's blood instantly. "Arthur didn't come home." "What do you mean he didn't come home?" Eleanor felt the world spin beneath her feet. "What do you mean by that?" "Anna came home normally at 2:30 with the school transport as usual, but Arthur didn't come with her." Mrs. Johnson spoke quickly, clearly nervous. "Anna said he stayed at school to finish an important project, but it seemed strange to me that he hadn't told us." I called the school and spoke to the principal. She said Arthur left at the normal time, along with all the other children. Eleanor was already grabbing her bag and running towards the elevator, her heart beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Mrs. Johnson, stay with Anna at home. Lock the door and don't let her out for anything in the world. I'm going to look for Arthur right now." The next 2 hours were the longest and most agonizing in Eleanor's life. She meticulously retraced the entire route between the school and Mrs. Johnson's house, not once, not twice, but 5 times, checking every side street, every alley, every place where a 7-year-old could have stopped or gotten lost. She checked the park where they used to play, searching every playground area, every bench, every tree where Arthur might be hiding. She checked the bakery where they sometimes bought sweets on the weekend, asking all the employees if they had seen a blonde boy with blue eyes. She ran to the public library Arthur loved to visit, hoping to find him lost among the shelves of children's books. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. With each passing minute, despair grew like a hungry beast, devouring her sanity. Eleanor called all the parents of Arthur's friends she could remember, the school 3 times, hospitals in the region, asking about lost children. At 5:30 in the afternoon, her hands trembling so much she could barely dial, she called Richard. Arthur disappeared. The 3 words cut the air like stabs. On the other end of the line, Richard remained silent for 2 seconds that seemed eternal. "Where are you?" "In front of the school. I've searched everywhere possible. He just disappeared. Don't move. I'm coming there, and I'll bring help." In 20 minutes, which dragged like hours, Richard arrived at the school with 2 private investigators who regularly worked for his company on corporate security matters. Mark Sutton and Robert Price were experienced professionals, specialists in missing persons cases. In 40 minutes, the police had been officially alerted, and a formal investigation was underway. The initial investigation, conducted with professional efficiency, revealed information that chilled everyone involved. Arthur had indeed left school at the normal time, accompanied by the usual group of children who took the school transport. But instead of getting on the familiar school bus that had taken him home for months, he had walked to the corner and voluntarily entered a black car that was waiting for him. Several children saw him and waved, thinking it was someone from the family who had come to pick him up for some special engagement. Arthur had waved back, seemingly calm and showing no signs of fear or coercion. Someone he knew and trusted, Mark Sutton concluded after hearing the children's testimonies. He got into the car spontaneously without hesitation. Who would have access to information about the children's schedules? Investigator Robert Price asked, pragmatic. Who would know exactly where and when to find Arthur? The school, obviously. The teachers. The principal. Eleanor listed mechanically, trying to think rationally through the panic. Some parents of his friends and the people closest to our family. Richard, Mrs. Johnson, my colleagues at work, and their service staff. Mr. Davies. Mark turned to Richard with focused attention. Employees, drivers, security guards, people who work in your house. Richard frowned, confused by the direction of the question. I don't have employees who have direct contact with the children. They've never been to my house, never met my team personally. But do some people know about their existence? Some, yes. Richard began to pale as he connected the dots. My secretary, my driver, my personal lawyer, and... He stopped abruptly. Mrs. Johnson. Who is Mrs. Johnson? The housekeeper at the house where I live, where I used to live with my ex-wife. Richard was clearly disturbed now. She's worked for our family for 15 years. She knows all the details of our personal life. And in recent months, since I started spending time with Eleanor and the children, I mentioned that I was visiting, that I was spending time with some special children. You need to talk to her immediately. Mark said directly and urgently. Richard took his cell phone with visibly trembling hands and dialed the house number. The phone rang 4, 5, 6 times before going to voicemail. Strange, because Mrs. Johnson always answered on the second ring with military punctuality. He tried her cell phone, straight to voicemail. She never, ever fails to answer my phone. Richard was visibly nervous now, running a hand through his hair repeatedly. Johnson is obsessively responsible and available. In 15 years, she's never ignored a call from me. Let's go to her house, now, Mark decided without hesitation. Who do you think has taken Arthur, and what could be their motive? How will Richard and Eleanor handle this new, terrifying development? Share your theories in the comments. The confrontation. The Davies mansion stood on one of the most exclusive streets in Kensington, an imposing classical palace surrounded by elaborate and perfectly manicured gardens. When they arrived, all the lights in the house were off, which was completely unusual for that time of day. Richard used his keys to enter, calling out loudly, "Martha! Martha! Are you here? I need to speak with you urgently." The silence that answered was heavy and ominous. The house seemed too empty, as if holding its breath. They found Mrs. Johnson in the large, spotless kitchen, sitting at the granite table, staring blankly at her clasped hands, as if praying or preparing for a confession. She was a woman of 62. Her hair completely gray, pulled back in a strict bun, her normally severe and controlled expression now vacant and lost. "Martha?" Richard approached cautiously, as if dealing with a wounded animal. "Where is Arthur?" She slowly raised her eyes, and Richard saw there a devastating mixture of guilt, despair, and something that seemed almost like relief at finally being discovered. "I didn't want to hurt him." The words came out low, almost whispered. "I swear to all that is sacred, I didn't want to cause that innocent child any pain." "Where is Arthur, Martha?" Richard had to lean on the table to keep from falling. "At the cottage in the Lake District, on the property that belonged to my parents." Mrs. Johnson began to cry silently, tears running down her wrinkled face. "He's fine, I promise. I gave him food, fresh water. I left him the toys he brought from school. I even let him turn on the television to distract himself." Richard felt the world spin around him. "Why, Martha? In God's name, why did you do this?" "Because she ruined everything." The answer burst from her, like a volcano of rage suppressed for months. "Everything was perfect. You were going to marry Miss Catherine. You were going to have a dignified life. You were going to build a respectable family, and this woman, this Eleanor, appeared out of nowhere and destroyed everything again." "Martha, the children are my biological children." "They are not." She shook her head violently, refusing to accept reality. "You don't have children. You have a legitimate wife. You have social responsibilities. You have a respectable man to care for. That woman is lying. She's taking advantage of your kindness. She's trying to destroy everything you built." Richard perceived with growing horror that he was dealing with someone who had completely lost touch with reality. Someone whose sick devotion had transformed into destructive obsession. "What's the exact address of the cottage?" Mark Sutton intervened, pragmatic and focused on the essential. "Old Mill Road, number 847, Windermere." Martha provided the information between sobs. "It's after the abandoned church bend, on a dirt road. The house is blue with white windows." They left immediately. The drive to the Lake District took 55 minutes that felt like 5 eternal hours. Eleanor cried silently in the back seat. Richard held her hand with desperate strength, and both prayed to find Arthur unharmed and without severe psychological trauma. Along the way, Richard called his lawyer and the family doctor, arranging all the assistance Arthur might need. He also contacted a child psychologist specializing in trauma to be available as soon as necessary. The reunion. The cottage was a small, isolated property with a simple but well-preserved house, painted light blue with white details on the windows and doors. When they arrived, they saw a light on in the window of what appeared to be a back room. Richard didn't wait for the investigators. He ran to the front door and began to pound. "Arthur! Arthur! Are you in there? It's Richard!" From inside the house, they heard a cry of relief and joy. "Richard! I'm here! I'm in here!" Richard tried the doorknob. Locked. Mark appeared with a screwdriver and quickly forced the simple lock. Arthur was in the back room, sitting on a single bed with a floral quilt, looking through a children's storybook. When he saw Richard at the door, his eyes filled with tears of pure relief, and he ran directly into the arms of the man he considered his personal hero. "Richard, I knew you'd find me. I knew it!" He clung to Richard's neck as if he would never let go. Richard held him as if Arthur were made of precious crystal, feeling his heart return to its normal rhythm for the first time in hours. "Are you hurt?" he asked, anxiously checking Arthur for any visible injuries. "Did she hurt you in any way?" No. Arthur shook his head against Richard's shoulder. "She just said it was a special surprise for you, that you had asked me to stay here for a little while waiting. But it took a long, long time, and she wouldn't let me call my mom to tell her where I was." Eleanor arrived a few seconds later, having run from the house's entrance, and enveloped her son in a desperate, protective hug. "My love, my child, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she cried openly, checking every inch of him for bruises. "Never again. I promise I'll never let anything happen to you again." "Mommy, I'm okay," Arthur comforted her with a heartbreaking maturity. "I knew they'd find me. Richard once promised he'd always protect me, and he kept his promise. The truth is out. How do you think Arthur will react to learning the full truth about Richard's identity? Will this shocking revelation bring the family closer or create new divides? Share your thoughts." The revelation in the car on the way back to the city, Arthur asked the question that definitively changed the course of their lives. "Richard, why were you so desperate when I disappeared? Why did you mobilize so many people to find me?" Richard looked at Eleanor in the rearview mirror. She was sitting next to Arthur, holding his hand as if it were a talisman against all the evils of the world. Their eyes met in the mirror, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. The moment had come. There was no more postponing the truth. "Because I love you, Arthur, and I couldn't live if something happened to you, just like a father loves a child." Silence stretched for miles of dark road. Richard could hear his own heart beating in his ears, exactly like a father loves a child. He finally replied, his voice choked with emotion. "It's because you are my real father." Eleanor closed her eyes, knowing there was no turning back. "Yes," Richard said with absolute simplicity. "I am your father, and Anna's too. I always have been, since before you were born." Arthur remained silent for a long moment, processing the information with the seriousness of someone much older. "I knew it," he finally said, surprising the adults. "I didn't know I knew it, but there was something inside me that recognized you. That's why I like you so much. That's why I feel safe when you're around. That's why you were so desperate when I disappeared." "Are you angry with me for not telling you sooner?" Richard asked, genuinely concerned about his son's reaction. "No," Arthur shook his head thoughtfully. "I'm angry with whoever made you stay away from us for so long, but I'm not angry with you." Eleanor began to cry again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. Her son had not only forgiven her, but had shown an emotional understanding that left her proud and humbled at the same time. "Arthur," she said softly, "do you understand that it was my fault? That it was I who didn't tell Richard that you existed?" "Why?" Arthur asked with genuine curiosity, without judging. Because I was scared. Scared that he wouldn't want you. Scared that I wasn't good enough for him. Irrationally scared that he would get tired of us and abandon us. But now he's here, Arthur observed with childlike logic. And he loves us. And you're good enough for anyone. And even if we had problems, he would still love us. So fear was wrong. The simplicity of Arthur's conclusion was devastating and liberating at the same time. When they arrived home, Anna ran to her brother and didn't let him go for several minutes, obsessively checking if he was really okay and whole. Mrs. Johnson had prepared hot chocolate for everyone, and they sat in the living room, finally reunited and safe. "Anna," Eleanor said delicately, "Richard has something very important to tell you." Anna looked at Richard with her big, trusting eyes, and to everyone's surprise, she smiled as if she already knew what was coming. "You're my daddy," she said before he could open his mouth. "Arthur told me on the phone when you were coming home, but I already suspected." "How did you suspect?" Richard asked, genuinely surprised. "You love me just like Mommy loves me, with that love that has no explanation, you know?" Anna shrugged as if it were obvious. "And you have the same eyes as me, and the same way of tilting your head when you're thinking. And when I get sick, you make that worried face that only daddies make. It was pretty obvious. You were my real dad." Richard laughed, a mixture of relief and admiration for his daughter's extraordinary emotional intelligence. "And you're not angry with me for not telling you sooner?" "No." Anna shook her head decisively. "We understand that sometimes adults do complicated things for reasons that seem right at the time, even if they're wrong. But now you can live with us," she continued, with hope shining in her eyes. "Can you be our daddy every day, not just Tuesdays and Thursdays?" Richard looked at Eleanor, who nodded slowly. "That will depend on several important things. First, I will officially divorce Catherine, and your mom and I need to talk about many things about our family's future." "Do you still love Mommy?" Anna went straight to the point, with the typical frankness of children. "Anna," Eleanor protested, her cheeks red with embarrassment. "It's a super important question, Mommy," Anna insisted seriously. "If he's going to be our real daddy every day, it's much better if you two love each other. Otherwise, it'll be weird and complicated." Richard looked directly into Eleanor's eyes, and the entire room seemed to fall into absolute silence. "I never stopped loving your mother, not for a second in 7 long years, not even when I thought she had abandoned me without explanation. And your mom?" Arthur joined the loving interrogation. "Do you love Richard?" Eleanor took a deep breath, knowing that after all they had been through, after almost losing Arthur, after years of lies and silences that almost destroyed everything, there was no longer room in their lives for anything but the absolute, raw truth. "Yes, I love him," she admitted, her voice choked. "I've always loved him, every day of these 7 years, even when I tried to convince myself that I had moved on." The children exchanged triumphant and complicit glances. "Then you just have to get married soon, and that's it," Anna concluded with childish practicality. "Problem solved, family complete, happy ending like in the good movies." What did you think of the children's surprising wisdom and their reactions to the truth? How do you feel about Eleanor and Richard's journey to finally being honest? Share your thoughts. The country estate garden in the Lake District was transformed into a fairy tale setting. Wildflowers in shades of white, pink, and yellow decorated every corner, intertwined with golden lights hanging from ancient trees like fallen stars. It was a small, intimate wedding. Only true family and the closest friends who had accompanied them on their journey of reconciliation. Anna wore a light pink dress with a voluminous skirt and a delicate crown of fresh flowers, feeling like a true princess. Arthur was elegant in a navy blue suit identical to his father's, with a tie he had personally chosen because it matches Daddy's eyes. Eleanor walked slowly towards the improvised altar under an ancient tree that Richard had climbed as a child, wearing a simple but elegant ivory dress, carrying a bouquet of white daisies picked from the estate's own garden. There was no father to walk her down the aisle, but she didn't feel alone or abandoned. Arthur and Anna accompanied her, one on each side, proud and solemn in their mission to deliver their mother to the man who finally, officially, had become the father he should have always been. Richard waited for her with tears in his eyes, wearing the suit he had bought specifically for that day, feeling like the luckiest and most grateful man in the universe. His divorce from Catherine had been finalized 3 months prior, after she was correctly diagnosed with severe bipolar disorder and admitted for intensive treatment at a specialized clinic. Mrs. Johnson was also receiving appropriate psychiatric follow-up, and Richard had decided, after much reflection and consultation with therapists, not to proceed legally, understanding that she needed medical treatment, not legal punishment. The ceremony was conducted by Dr. Robert Green, a retired judge and family friend who knew the entire complicated story and had been deeply moved by their journey of separation and reunion. Eleanor and Richard, his voice laden with genuine emotion, you two had to travel an extraordinarily long and painful road to reach this moment. You got lost in the labyrinth of fear and found each other through courage. You hurt each other deeply and healed each other. You loved each other despite the physical and emotional distance, despite the lost time, despite all the circumstances that conspired against you. Today, you are not just getting married. You are formalizing a family that always existed in your hearts, a love that never truly died, a second chance that we all deserve when we fight for it with total dedication. When it was time for personal vows, Richard held Eleanor's hands and spoke directly to her soul, completely ignoring the people around them. Eleanor, I spent 7 years believing you had abandoned me because you didn't love me enough. Today, I know you left to protect me in the same brave way you protected our children all those lonely years. You are the strongest woman I know, the most dedicated mother I can imagine, the bravest person I have ever met. I solemnly promise that we will never lose each other again. I promise to be the father Arthur and Anna deserved to have 7 years ago, the husband you always dreamed of having, the man our family needs to be complete. I love you with an intensity that scares me. I always loved you even when it hurt, and I will love you until my last heartbeat. Eleanor could barely speak through the tears that streamed freely down her face. Richard, I made the biggest mistake of my life when I left without explaining my fears. I thought I was freeing you from a burden, but I was only running away from the responsibility of trusting in our love. Fear of not being enough, fear that our children would not be perfect, irrational fear that you would get tired of us and abandon us. Today, I know that true love doesn't run from difficulties. It stays, it fights, it builds bridges over chasms. I promise never again to make decisions alone that affect our family. I promise to be your partner in all battles, your partner in all dreams, your accomplice in all adventures. I love you with all my soul. I always loved you even when I tried to deny it. And our love story is only just truly beginning. When the judge declared them husband and wife, Arthur and Anna shouted, "Hooray!" in unison, and threw rose petals into the air that fell over the couple like a perfumed blessing. It was the complete family, finally reunited, officially sealed. During the reception that followed, with live music and dancing under the stars, Anna approached her parents with a solemn expression. "Can I ask for something special?" she asked, like a miniature adult. "Of course, Princess. Anything," Richard replied. kneeling to her height. "When I grow up and get married someday, I want my wedding to be exactly like yours." "What do you mean, my love?" Eleanor asked, intrigued. "With a complicated story that ends truly happily," Anna explained with conviction. "With people who love each other even when it's very difficult and confusing. With a family that never gives up on each other, even when it seems impossible. With real love, the kind that never runs out." Arthur joined the conversation, as he always did. "And when I have children, I'll tell them the full story of how Grandpa Richard and Grandma Eleanor got lost and found each other." He smiled with precocious wisdom. "So they'll know that sometimes the best things in life need to be won twice, and that true love is worth waiting and fighting for." Richard and Eleanor looked at each other over their children's heads, knowing that Arthur and Anna had learned the most important and valuable lessons about life. That true love forgives the gravest mistakes, that families are built with infinite patience and daily dedication, and that second chances, when earned with genuine effort, can be even more precious and solid than first opportunities. What was the most impactful moment of the wedding ceremony for you, and why? Share your final thoughts on Richard and Eleanor's journey to finding their true happiness.